Okay, so I'm recording this at night, and I know that at home, the stars of my videos, they're the cats. It's not me. Here, this is your star. Vegas. City of Vegas. And you'll notice the blue lights over in this area on the Cosmopolitan. They're really kind of cool. The hotel I'm in the area doesn't do that. They've got some really cool purple lights at the end, but you can't see them from here. But it's a nice view of the Strip. I really enjoy having this view, and I thought, you know what? For the Vegas Golden Knights season preview, I'm going to dim the lights as much as I can so that the subscribers can see as much of the Strip as possible. So if I'm a little bit dark and out of focus, don't care. The star of this video is this city that this team belongs to. Or does this team belong to the city? Or does the team belong to, does the city belong to the team is what I'm saying. Anyways, this past season, the Vegas Golden Knights finished with 93 points, and they were out in the first round. This was a tremendous disappointment after 2017-2018, where they had 109 points, and they made it to the finals. Now, making that sting more is the fact that it was a controversial way that their season ended, and they're still not happy about it, and no fan base would be. That being said, we are 50-some days away from seeing a brand new season, and hopefully that talk dissipates pretty quickly. I've covered hockey long enough to know it doesn't. It really doesn't. Montreal fans who weren't born during the Richard riots talk about the Richard riots. That's just the way things work in hockey. Sports fans in general have pretty long memories. So for Vegas, they're trying to avenge what happened last year and get to the Stanley Cup playoffs for 3 times in their first 3 seasons, which is a very rare feat in the National Hockey League, I might add. Now, 2018-2019, they had 249 goals for. That's 13th in the National Hockey League. 230 goals against, which is 10th. So middle of the road in both goals for and goals against. By the end of October, they were 5-6-1. And I remember them getting absolutely destroyed in a game while I was watching the Vancouver Canucks playing a game at Rogers. And I remember looking at the score and going, is that seriously the score? Is that what's happening? It was stunning. End of November, they were 14-12-1, so still struggling, but getting better. By the end of December, they're 23-15-4, and they've started to get back into the groove. By the end of January, 29-19-4 is the record. By the end of February, 34-26-5, so they had a setback that month. But in March, they get it back in gear, 42-30-7. By the end of April, by the end of the season in April, they're 43-32-7. So good record, decent point totals, but disappointing for Vegas considering it's a drop of 16 points. When you look at how they started the season their first year and the way they started the second year, that makes up a big part of the difference. The MVP for this team, I went with 2 different players, to be honest. I think Mark Stone is going to be the driving force behind this team's complete and totally. Their forward group will be all about Mark Stone. And not just because he's a good scorer, but because he's fantastic at both ends of the ice. Now, Marc-Andre Fleury is, to me, overall the team's MVP, but if Stone doesn't have a very good year, it could be a really rough season for Vegas, so I was torn on which one to go with. Fleury overall, probably, but Stone definitely has MVP statistics as well. For goals, I went with Max Pacioretty. If Pacioretty plays all 82 games, if he can get into the groove, and playing on a pretty solid first line, he should get lots of ice time, he should get lots of special teams time. Pacioretty should absolutely be their number 1 goals producer. That being said, of course, Carlson could get there, and Stone is in the mix for that as well. For a dark horse, I went with Nick Hague. I know he's a rookie coming in, and I know he's expected by some to make the team, but he could push for a top 4 role. Absolutely, he could push for a top 4 role. This is a blue line that I don't think is particularly deep. This is a blue line that definitely needs that breakout player, and I say Nick Hague could be it. For what about, I have Garrett Sparks. Sparks comes over from Toronto. Toronto fans will tell you, for the most part, they'll say he's not good enough. There's a reason that Toronto got rid of him, and he's not NHL level, and he's going to end up in the American League. And there's definitely a lot of Vegas fans that say, you know what, Sparks got brought over, he'll play for our American League franchise, he's not going to play for Vegas. But I could see him pushing Malcolm Subban. And with the amount of games that Malcolm Subban was out for, and I'm not talking about injured, I'm talking about Fleury played virtually every night. And if you're going to say, well, that's because Fleury has to, the coach has to decide the goaltending rotation so their goalies don't get exhausted. Most starting goaltenders in the NHL will want to play every night. Coach has to limit their starts. And Fleury started way too many games in a row. So, to me, there was a clear sign that Gerard Gallant didn't have a whole lot of faith in Subban, and I could see Sparks pushing him because Sparks, while yes, he had a rough finish to the season, he was decent at the start of the year, and he's got the potential to be a backup goaltender in the NHL. Doesn't have starter upside, but backup potential, sure. Trade bait, I went with John Merrill, only if Merrill finds himself as a healthy scratch early in the year. Again, they don't have a tremendous amount of depth on the blue line. There was a lot of names here, similar to Vancouver in that regard. Although for forward group and for goaltenders, I would put them ahead of Vancouver. The defense, there are some issues here, and we'll get to that. But I could see John Merrill being a guy who gets dangled out there as trade bait, and he might get taken. And that was basically the only name I could come up with. There are other names you might be able to think of. Brandon Peary, maybe, if he ends up being a healthy scratch. And again, it comes down to does Gerard Gallant trust players. Peary's one that he may not have a whole lot of trust and faith in either. And the advanced stats crowd will say, hey, there's good reason for that. Others will say, well, no, he's got the offensive acumen. Just make sure you're playing him in the right situations. He's fine. Their lineup, excellent. Their top six is fantastic. Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone is the first line. Second line, Marchessault, Carlson, and Smith. The fact that over the last 12 months, Marchessault, Carlson, and Smith have gone from the first line to the second line, really, really excellent for this team. While Marchessault, Carlson, and Smith were great that first year, ideally they're your second line. Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone should be decent. For Stastny, you're hoping for probably a few more points than you got in year one, but he'll be fine. Injuries, as long as they avoid the injury bug, they should be okay. Third line, Peary, maybe, although that being said, I can't see Carrier being held out. So if Peary plays, he should play third line if he's a healthy scratch. Maybe Nosek ends up on that third line. Maybe Carrier. Odds are one of Carrier or Nosek ends up on the other side. They do have an extra forward or two here. Cody Eakin, likely still on the third line. Alex Tuck, third line because he can't move up to the second or the first. Tuck's a good player. Maybe at some point he's a guy they look at potentially moving only because he has the top six upside and only because you want to keep adding depth to your organization. Cody Glass likely makes this roster. Could actually end up making it on the left side. He could. Does Glass come in as a center? And fourth line center, probably not the best spot for him. But Cody Eakin, coming off a 20-goal season, shouldn't be on the fourth line either. Ryan Reeves, probably best suited to fourth line. As I said, Carrier likely not held out of the lineup over Peary because Gallant's a big fan of Carrier, big fan of Nosek, and Reeves, and all three of these guys should be in their lineup regularly. Nicholas Roy that came over, we'll see if he gets a shot at the lineup. Patrick Brown as well, veteran player who's played in the NHL before. Valentin Zykov was picked up on waivers. Does he end up getting a shot at the roster more than he did last year? I don't think so. And then down the middle, I threw in Jake Leschyshyn because why not? I was a big fan of his dad, and it would be nice to see Jake get an NHL job this year. He may push for that. And Tyrell Goulbourne, another one, veteran player brought in. Veteran-ish, like he's got some games in the NHL. He's been around for a while, journeyman kind of player. So there's your forward group, and there's some uncertainty when it comes to lines 3 and 4, maybe. But for the most part, you know where guys are going to end up playing. You know who your regulars are. And it's a pretty solid group. The blue line, that's where the uncertainty comes in. So top 4, is it McNabb, Schmidt, Schultz, and Theodore. Now, Schultz still hasn't signed a contract. I can't see Schultz asking for a ton of money. I'm not sure why he's not signed yet, but it hasn't happened. And yet, does Schultz end up in that top 4 role? Does Merrill maybe bump him down? Does Haig push into that position? Merrill and England, likely, in my eyes anyways, that third pairing, Shea Theodore being in that top 4. And Theodore and Schmidt are fantastic. McNabb has his moments where he lapses, but in general, he's a pretty solid defenseman. As said, Haig may push into a spot. Nick Holden, pretty solid number 7 defenseman. Not a guy you want in there every night if he's in your regular lineup. You're probably having some issues with your depth. Jacob Magna was brought in. He provides depth. Zach Whitecloud is down there as well. Whitecloud may get his share of games. And Jake Bischoff, re-signed in the offseason, may get into some games as well. Again, there's a lot of names here. Who's going to end up where? That's a question for Gerard Gallant. That's where he's going to earn his money, is deciding which player is going to play which spot on the blue line. Marc-Andre Fleury, Malcolm Subban, Garrett Sparks. As I said, it should be Fleury and Subban, but you don't bring in Sparks with the idea of, hey, Sparks is just going to go to the American League. You bring in Sparks to push Malcolm Subban. You bring in Sparks so that there isn't a lack of competition. Yeah, Oscar Dansk is a goaltender in the American League who could have come up and played, but in reality, Sparks and Subban are both, in my eyes anyways, a little bit above him. And so, to me, they're battling it out for the backup spot. And there's nothing wrong with having 2 goaltenders fighting it out for that backup spot. And it may very well make Malcolm a little bit better, a little bit more prepared, and maybe you'll see more of a split in games. Marc-Andre Fleury at this stage in his career should be playing about 50 games. You don't want to overplay him. He was a number 1 draft pick, been a great goaltender, but he was drafted 16 years ago. If you overextend Fleury, you increase the risk that he tires out by the time the playoffs roll around and that he's less effective. You want to give him nights off, and if he doesn't want nights off, that's fine. You're the coach. You give him nights off. It will be interesting to see if Sparks pushes for that job or if Sparks just folds. Maybe Sparks comes in after his issues with Toronto. Maybe he's still upset about that. I'm grasping definitely on that one, but he's had some words about how he felt things went with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that should be a lighting a fire under him in terms of going into next season and how he's going to play. Going to be an interesting preseason for these guys, and it's going to be really, really fascinating to see which top 6 defensemen emerge. McNabb, Merrill, England, Schmidt, and Theodore should be top 5 of the top 6. Schultz, he may have to hold off Haig. Holden may fight it out with England as well. I'm glad they brought back England. I know there was some feeling of, well, if England doesn't come back, that's fine. But you need that veteran on the blue line. You need that elder statesman on the blue line. They have that. And I think it keeps things relatively solid. And you keep some of that original core together. Part of what I get concerned with when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights is that first year you had the Golden Misfits, that feeling of we're underdogs and teams abandoned us and we're going to prove them wrong. As some of those misfits go and you get some players in who come in here because they want to play here, who sign here as free agents, who get traded to Vegas, you don't have that same feeling of our teams didn't want us, and you run the risk of losing some of that fight and some of that spark that helped that team get to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2018 and got them to 109 points. If I had to say their most likely finish, honestly, they can finish as high as first in this division. I don't see them finishing lower than third. Now, the key to all of this, I'll come back into focus. The key to all this is, for me, Stone up front, because if Stone gets injured or he falls apart, you're going to have Tuck and Smith then. Tuck probably bounces up onto the first line, but now you're looking at some scoring depth problems on the right side potentially. And for a team that did lose some depth in the offseason, and they were shedding depth reportedly because they wanted to keep Gusev around, and then Gusev wanted too much money, so he goes to New Jersey. Now they're dealing with an issue where if one of their top 6 forwards, especially Stone, gets hurt, they may struggle. And Fleury, of course, if he gets hurt, then you could potentially be looking at a major issue as well. Yes, they got through injuries to Marc-Andre Fleury in year one, but again, it was a different feeling then. I don't see them finishing lower than third unless we see some kind of a disaster with this team. They're a good team. They will be interesting to watch if they make the playoffs for that third year in a row. See how much fire they have to come back after that feeling that they got hosed in round one this past spring. So there you go. From the Vegas Strip in Las Vegas. And I might as well drop the board down just to give you guys a view of what can be seen from my hotel here and why I'm willing to risk low light and this being kind of grainy for this preview because it's gorgeous. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. I will put the board back up at the end. There you go. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think. And remember, these depth charts I get from either Cap Friendly, Elite Prospects. I go through Daily Faceoff. I go through various sites. Daily Faceoff I couldn't use for this because they still show Gusev in the lineup. Even though they show a New Jersey Devils jersey, they just haven't updated the site and put Gusev on the Devils. It's awkward. So I went, yeah, I can't use this. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts as always. Thank you guys so much for watching. From the beautiful and very, very warm city of Las Vegas, this is Shannon signing off. Appreciate all your support, and I will talk to you again soon.